Welcome to my 22 Kia Niro EV guide on disabling VESS, VESS, virtual engine sound system. It is the annoying beep you hear when backing up and the fake motor noise when driving forward. Prior to 2020, European cars had a button to disable this. The wiring for that is apparently still there, even in American cars and post-2020 cars. The button would be somewhere on this, which some people call the crash pad, and you can get to the wiring and wire in your own little Momentary switch here in the dash, and then you can turn that beep off. It resets every time the car starts though, so you have to remember to push the button again if you want to turn it off. The basic procedure is going to be removing the fuse panel here. There's a side trim panel here, and this lower panel here you have to pop, or I think this one, but you have to pop these panels off, or at least loosen them. And behind this is some wiring that you can clip into, and then you can let the button just hang. I'm going to try to find a deep enough spot somewhere in here where I can punch a small hole through and mount the button. Unfortunately, this has a circuit board apparently behind the whole unit, and you can't put a button here because you would have to drill through the circuit board that's for the whole entire unit. So that's a no-go. There's also apparently, if you can find it, you can get the button panels with that button already there and just replace the entire button panel. But since they were only in Europe and I'm in the United States, finding them here appears to be pretty difficult. Most people were getting them off of wrecked cars. So that's where we're going to. So now we will cover some of the things you will need for this job. If there are any additions, I will let you know during the video, but I think this will be it. I have a Momentary switch. This was purchased off of Amazon. It has an LED ring light, 4 leads for the LED and for the switch and for grounds. I have some quick wire connections. Unfortunately, I made a little bit of a mistake. The wire on this is 24 AWG. The smallest connector I have is 22 AWG, so it's a little bit too big for that wire. I do have a kind of crappy crimper here. It should still work. If I have to, I'll replace it later, but ideally they would be the right size so that they would crimp well. I'm also going to use these to help crimp a little bit better, these vice grips. I have a drill and some drill bits so I can drill a small hole into the place I located in the dash to put this switch. And then I also have a flathead screwdriver. Ideally, you would also have, instead of the flathead screwdriver, a trim panel puller, which I do have somewhere but cannot find. Flathead normally works, but you might mar the plastic panels just a little bit. To start, I have taken the fuse panel off, of course, and I've moved the seat back as far as possible so that I have some room to maneuver here as needed. I see there's a little gap there, and that's where I'm going to try to start to pry this off. Let's see, I am going to put the camera down and try to pry this off with both hands so that I can do it a little more neatly. And there it is. There's the panel removed. Let me zoom out a little bit here. At my wide angle, that'll help. It's just like this. I started right in that spot that I indicated where there was a little bit of a gap. It was a pretty tight clip to start the bottom one, but then I just worked my way up the panel and pried. It took a little bit of force to pop it this way and then slide it out. This lip here goes kind of under this edge, which is a little bit tricky, and I think it's going to be a little bit difficult to put back in, but that exposes the side of the dash here. There are also 2 Phillips head screws, this one here and this one here, that hold this bottom panel on. We don't need to pull this panel all the way off, but I do want to pull it out some and out of the way, so I'll need to take those off. So to your tool list, add a Phillips head screwdriver. There's also a 3rd screw just a little bit up, and if you'll notice, that is the panel that the crash pad itself is actually on. That may be the only one we need to remove. I'm going to give that a shot and see. Okay, so these trim panels are pretty tight. The snaps that hold them are very strong. I did have to move this panel out a little bit. I had to grab it here and give it a firm pull. Notice it's not all the way off, but then once this was off, I could give this one a firm pull, and now it is coming off as well. I'm going to go ahead and fully remove this panel. You'll notice there's several of these white clips. The hardest one to remove was pushed in here because I had to get it at a little bit of an angle, and I don't like to go at too strong of an angle because you might break the clip. They're pretty strong, but you want to basically try to pull straight out whenever possible and get closer to the clip and pull rather than putting angular pressure on it because it will lever it off. I've now flipped it upside down because there is a little tab on this wire. I'm going to unplug this wire and move it out of the way. This wiring harness should have the wire that we need in it. I'll just have to pull this coating back a little bit to expose the wires. Additionally, looking at this panel, it looks like there is plenty of space on this side, somewhere right in here, to put the switch in. Looks like a pretty good location. I'll do a test fit on that once I get this off. So looking at this from the side, I want to put it on. The switch, when lined up with the front of the panel, only extends just to the back of the trim. And if you notice, underneath there's a bolt here with some depth behind it, meaning that even the wires shouldn't really get crunched behind that by being pushed up against something. I think this is going to fit perfectly right in there. So here is the connector. I'm holding it with the tab up, and starting from here on this top edge is pin 1. So counting over 9 pins is pin 9. That wire is blue with a black stripe. There are other blue wires. You do not want those. It should be pin 9 coming from this edge of the connector. So if you're holding it like this, starting from the top left is pin 1. So holding it in a more comfortable position, it's the top right, and then 9 pins over. Blue with a black stripe. That is where you want the momentary switch to connect. You're also going to want to connect it to a ground, which are either of the 2 wires on the end here. Pin 24 is what is labeled in the schematic at least, and I believe this other pin, which is 12, is as well. Most of these connectors like this will have 2 grounds so that if one gets damaged, there's still a ground for the other connectors. But there is also a wire on this connector for the LED, and that is what I'm going to find now and show you as well, and then I'm going to start tying into these wires. Easily enough, going at it the same way. The next wire over, connector 10, is pink, and that is the LED connector for your switch. Now I'm going to start prepping the switch. In order to do that, I'm going to be putting these pink connectors on all 4 switch wires. Well, actually, maybe not all 4. 2 of them, I believe, should be connected together for grounds. So it should be 3. Those will plug into these. These snap shut on the car wires to pinch into them. And if you look, there's a little metal connector that the existing car wiring slides into, and when you snap this shut, it should cut the sheathing and make a decent connection, and then you can plug your wires into this. Pro tip, don't be a dummy like me and balance this on your leg, or you'll be cleaning these up out from under your seat for years. Anyway, I'm going to close this now so I don't spill it, and show you basically how this connector works again. You push your existing car wiring into that little groove right there, and then you snap it shut. Once you snap it shut, the wire that goes on the end of the switch slides into here, and it connects to this other piece right there, this other little groove, and that gives you a tap. This is a T-tap, taps into the existing wire, lets you T in with your own connector. These just slide onto the wires and crimp on. So I'm going to get started on that, and I'll be back. So another tip that I did in testing this little nut is what screws this to the dash and holds it from the back. I removed it first, and then I tested. I had to pause for a moment because my wife let the dog out. Anyway, I was looking at this nut that screws it to the back of the dash. And I wanted to test that my connectors would fit through that nut. And get this in frame here. It's hard to do this and hold the phone, but it just barely fits. You have to really jam it to get it through there. Since I have multiple connections like this, that means I'd have to feed them through one at a time and feed them through the hole in the dash one at a time. They could get jammed up. It's going to be a little bit of a problem. So you're aware also this switch is 12 millimeters. You can get bigger ones. You could probably fit a slightly bigger one here. I got the smallest because I did not know how much clearance I would have behind or how much room I would have. Or with a smallish one, there may be smaller, but because that's going to be tight to get these connectors through the hole in the dash. Before wiring these to the switch, I'm going to go ahead and drill the hole in the dash piece to this panel here, the one that you saw me remove. I'm going to go ahead and get the switch mounted in this, then get the wires connected to the spade lugs and go from there. This is going to require drilling, pretty simple. I'm going to get a drill bit that is the same size, 12 millimeters or thereabouts. I think my bits are standard, and preferably even a little bit smaller, and then I will work this through that hole and give a test fit and then get the wiring attached. So I mentioned that this button was 12 millimeters. You can see I have it mounted now. I have not put the ends on the wire yet. The closest drill bit I had that wasn't over was 3/8. 3/8 is of course a little bit small, so I went and hunted down a Dremel and used a little Dremel tip to round the hole out until I got it to just tight enough to fit this in there. Got the nut on the back. Another pro tip: clean up any little plastic crud that comes from drilling or dremeling in here, because the last thing you want is little plastic bits eventually vibrating their way into the switches and making the switches go bad or have bad connections. So that is all done. I'm going to now go ahead and crimp these wires together. Okay, here we are. Got a few things to tell you, then we can button this up. I've already tested it, everything works, but I want to give you some information about what I did and then button it up and show it in operation. This switch, which is a normally off momentary switch, has 4 connections. If you get a different one from the one I will provide in the description, the wiring may be different. Use your brain. I know you got one if you're doing this. On this switch, the red wire is for the LED, black wires for ground, and the 2 blues are used for the switch in here, and they can be wired in different configurations. The wiring diagrams that come with the switch gives you 2 configurations, one for the light to be on or off with the device it's connected to, and one for the light to be on all the time. We're not following either of those completely because some of that wiring is already done in the car. It was already set up because there used to be a switch in some of these models of cars. Please ignore the plane flying overhead. There is a small airport nearby. Anyway, so that's what we've done here. In the dash, you will see that the pink wire is the LED. That's on pin 10. That will go to the red wire on the switch that we have here. Black wire on pin 12 or 24 has been tapped. That will go to the combination wire of the blue and the ground from the switch. And then there is a blue-black wire on here on pin 9 that has a tap. That is the one that goes to ground we discussed before, that turns the VESS on and off. That goes to the other blue connection on the switch. So again, blue on this switch goes to the blue-black. The blue and black wires wired together go to the ground, and then the red wire goes to the pink for the LED. Another little issue I had is that, of course, these have this little tongue in them. If the tongue is a little bit up or down, it won't slide into the connector correctly. It will slide over top or underneath of where it needs to go, and it's a little tight in here, so you need to look and make sure that you've plugged that in correctly, or guess what, it's not going to work. Another little problem I had is these connectors did not pierce the wire very well in here, so I wasn't getting a very good connection. I had to strip the wire a little bit underneath of where I was putting it. So I test fit, I didn't want them all in the same place because they're a little bit bulky and they can bump into each other. So they're different distances down the wires that I connected them to. You have to be careful when you're stripping the little bit of wire under there. You don't want to cut any of the wire inside. If you cut it all the way through, you're going to have to splice it together and probably add an extension in there, and it's just a mess. If you nick it a little bit, it's going to be a weak point where the wire could break or eventually short out. This is a little bit of extra weight on this anyway, which is, not the best, but it's going to last a pretty long time, I think. And hell, if you did this and followed along, if one of them comes loose, the switch will stop working and you'll know what to do to fix it. You may have to splice some extra wire in here to make some extra length. Not terribly difficult. I can't plug this in and run it at the same time, so I'm going to plug it in and run the camera at the same time anyway. So I'm going to plug it in, show it to you loose and how it works, and then I'm going to button it all up. Okay, the car's on now. Let me turn the AC blower down so it's not drowning me out. And you can see I've got those wires connected. I've got the wire plugged back into the crash pad or crash panel or whatever it is Kia calls this thing. Maybe it's a normal automotive term. I don't know. At any rate, it's all plugged in. We're going to give this thing a test run. I tested it before, but not since I've hooked it up this time. I'm going to close my door, otherwise the door nanny will yell at me. And you can see, I'll pick this up gently. I don't want to wear the wires out too much. There's the crash panel. And you can see way over here. There it is. Green light. So right now the green light is on. VESS is on. I'll move my seat up because it's a little bit difficult to reach to do all this. And I moved it back to have room to work. So there we go. Seat is up. You can see VESS is on. Maybe I can get a better angle on this. There we go. You can see that it's on. I'm gonna let this go gently. Don't you fall. You fell anyway. Thank you. All right. Brake is on. Reverse. There's the beep. Out of reverse. Tap the button. The light goes off. I'm now in reverse. Dash cam's on, the reverse camera's on. That's it, no beep. Right now I'm gonna leave it in reverse and tap it. It should start beeping, and it does immediately. That's it. I'm gonna button it up and show it to you completed so you can see how neat it looks when it's done, and we're finished. All right, there it is, all back together. Looks like nothing ever happened. Now, of course, these clips, they're tight. The more you wiggle them and pop them in and out, you're going to wear them out a little bit. So hopefully you don't have to go back in there too much and you do it right the first time. There's the button, on and off. Just like that.